Pandwe Gibson, Bill Jacobson, Tamara Wendt, and Jason Saltzman are giving a roof to creativity and spontaneous collaboration up and down the coast. They'll tell us the tale of 3 cities and how where work might impact what we do.
You made it. Right here.
All right. Are our mics on? Everybody hear us? Hello, everybody. Hello, Miami. Very happy to be here. It's pretty cool for me because I lived in Miami for 5 years, and I moved back to New York because there really wasn't a startup ecosystem yet. So basically, I had to go to one of the coldest winters of the world, to find a place to work. And now you do it. Now you have this event, right? So, but I'm really happy to be here. And I'm super excited to introduce everybody today because workspaces are blowing up all over the United States. There's an entrepreneurial, what I like to call an entrepreneurial renaissance, where companies are being built all over the place. And spaces like mine and ours are indicative of that growth. So I'd like to go into introducing you to Bill, who has a company called Workbar out of Boston.
Hey, everybody.
Pandwe, who has actually a makerspace in Miami.
Thank you for having me.
Which is really awesome. And we have Tamara of the lab, which is really cool. So we're here to talk about, how different, how's the culture, in Miami right now? How's the culture in Boston? I'll talk a little bit about the culture in New York and what the differences are, and have it relate back to, what's happening right now in Miami, which is really awesome, because when I was here, it was really about partying and everybody getting together. And now there's actually people collaborating, in tech products. There's people getting together and doing these things, and everybody's here to kind of talk about that. So my first question for everybody, and I'll start with Bill, is, New York City, the entrepreneurial ecosystem is all about the hustle. The culture is, get it done, grind it out, like just do it. Work to 24 hours, work balance life really doesn't exist, like just get it done. Like what's that like in Boston?
So in Boston, it's evolved. It's really evolved. I have to think about that question in terms of a little bit of a time frame. And it has just completely shifted around to me in the last number of years. It used to be a much more stereotypical Boston, where your head's down, you'd go into a bar, you wouldn't talk to people unless you knew them and already had 3 days with them that you knew them. And that has shifted around a lot. Now it's a really inclusive set of people. And I think a lot of the reason for that shift is coming from the startup community that continues to think that, hey, what do we really have in Boston? It's all these universities and big companies and thinkers, and the more we can cross-discipline and learn from others and everything, that's how things are gonna get ahead. Co-working spaces, incubators, all kinds of resources have emerged around this, and the whole community has really embraced it. It used to be that there were just a couple of clusters, Kendall Square, one of the major ones, where startups emerged, and now there's companies and startups infused all through the city, and that has made, wherever you go, you're gonna run into people, and it's changed the culture around a lot. It's really a good place.
Cool. So I have 2 spaces out of Miami, so we can get 2 different perspectives. You're a little bit more niche because you're a maker space, which is a little bit different than just a co-working space, where co-working spaces accept really anyone into them. And maker spaces are very niche. She's working on eco space, is correct, right? So what's the entrepreneur like in Miami in your eyes?
So we're sort of a maker incubator space, a hybrid in between those 2 worlds. And I would say that the market here is unique in that we identify the assets that are already in Miami. So if you think about Miami's development and what's happened in terms of maker spaces as a whole, as you pointed out, we're sort of a niche of a niche. Yeah. We have the privilege of working with the community that fundamentally has a basis in the skill set. So if you think of why companies don't or do move to a location, it's because they have the human capital, right? Yeah, sure. Well, Miami has the human capital to be able to do product-based, utensil-based, manufacturing-based, mid to low-tech utensil-based development in droves. Yeah. So if you think of, say, one of our companies, we have an electric motorcycle company called AlleyNYC. The individuals who started that company have engineer and architecture backgrounds, right? They can do design work, they know how to do that, but they don't know anything about actually getting that product to market as it relates to the manufacturing of it. Who does that is an electrician and a mechanic. Yeah, sure. We have that in droves in Miami as a result of who was able to stay after the sort of construction boom burst here. You have in droves those tradesmen, electricians, mechanics, architects, that community that could be placed into a workforce. So, I mean, I would say that the ecosystem in Miami being a niche of a niche, we spend a lot of time doing education about what we're doing. Yeah. But in that education, people are like, oh yeah, that's awesome. It couldn't happen anywhere else in America. I'm from New Orleans. I've worked in Boston. I've worked in New York and LA and a lot of different places. And Miami is the only place for something like this to happen because, one, we have the workforce, so we have the human capital. Two, we're sunny Southern California, so where else could you do green and sustainability and merge those two worlds together? Sure. And then South Florida has the basis of the largest number of startups in that product-based space of anywhere, I would say, in the nation. Wow. And then our huge cultural and diversity mix allows for innovation in a much more robust and powerful way. So, yeah. I mean, I find it to be exciting to be here and be doing this work.
I mean, electric motorcycle is pretty damn exciting. Yeah. Like, how far are they? I know we don't have like a lot of time here, but we have. So tell me a little bit. Can you real quick?
So they're unveiling their prototype at Emerge America this year. So you'll get to see, and I think that's the really exciting thing about green tech and about product-based development, right? So to get a high-tech invention to market is a huge time frame. It's hugely cost-effective. Like, I mean, it costs. Heavy, like the process to do that can take a couple years, right? To actually get your prototype out there. In product-based development, you have the people to develop it. You can get a prototype within 2 to 3 months. Nice. So we have another company that I don't want to. You want me to tell it down? Wait.
What we're allowed to do or not allowed to do, but I want to hear everything. This is awesome.
We have another company that is called Earthware, and they develop utensils. So this is one. This is made 95% of potato, 5% of soy. And then this prototype that they were able to create locally is 100% corn. So this has huge disruptive potential, right, in the market when
it's like,
we're
why are we using plastic?
Ever. We never have to use it again.
And this is being built. This is being built in Miami.
It's being built in Miami.
I'm totally moving back. I'm getting like a tan, hopefully. Like I'm see-through right now.
Come on.
Since we don't have a lot of time, I want to just go back to the original question again. Like, what, in your view, and Tamara, you have one of the largest co-working spaces in Miami right now, which is the Lab. And I actually had a tech company that came out of Miami also, which is a whole different story. But they worked out of the Lab, and they loved it, and they collaborated in it, met some developers, and it really aided it in the growth of their company. But what do you feel like the entrepreneur is like in Miami today?
Well, I think some of the best things that Miami brings, it's such a warm place, not just in terms of the weather, but just culturally. I know I moved here, I started coming down here about 5 years ago, and I went on a bike ride and was just welcomed in and just fell in love with Miami that way. And I just see that a lot, people go out to lunch. It's just very, very social. And in the world of business, that it's just nice that it's so mixed. You go out and your friends become all the people that are helping you. When new companies come here, I see this time and time again, the hands go out, how can we help you? And there's this sort of, hey, let's do it together, let's build this. And you don't hear a whole lot of, competition. It's not, I need to protect myself and just make this happen and build my network. And it's really just a matter of like, let's do it all together.
Yeah, sure. That's a great answer. It becomes, the culture has to be ready for that. You got to be ready to accept the fact that everybody's working on different things. And you can't be afraid, to share your ideas. I mean, what's very indicative in an early stage startup community that I find, and I've been pretty much all over. I've been to Moscow. I've been to all these places where all these different ecos. I just got back from Kuwait, which is really interesting to see like this startup community. And what's very indicative of a very early stage startup community is people don't want to share because they're afraid, that their ideas are going to get stolen from them. They really think that, the person sitting next to them, is going to take their idea, they're going to run with it, or they're going to, they're just afraid of that. And it's kind of crazy because how else are you going to know, if you have a good idea, if you don't tell anybody about it,
Right.
And by working and living, in a space that becomes more like a community is extremely important, and that's why it's so special that, everybody's here right now and you guys are here, because this is the building of a community, a startup ecosystem that's building. You guys are interested, people are getting together, the conversation's starting to happen, and things are going to be great. I really feel like this energy in Miami that's going to grow. I mean, at a very early stage, I don't want to take up all of our time, I'm very time conscious, and I babble a lot, so I apologize, but I got in New York early for the co-working world. There was 3 other co-working spaces, that when we first started, and now you can't walk down a city block without bumping into one. And it started with things just like this. It started with people coming together, wanting to hear people like us talk. Nobody ever wanted to hear me talk before. I mean, now I'm like, okay, you want me to talk? That's cool. But like, but these things, there's a future to this. And the more interested people are, the more you could bring things like developers in, that could start building things. Plastic forks that are now corn forks, and we don't have to use plastic anymore, that are completely biodegradable. I mean, this is how things happen. They happen in spaces like ours, and I'm really excited about everything that's happening in Miami now, if I didn't say that already. So Bill, the next question I have is like, the topic of this panel is, does where you work change how you work? I think that was an excellent question. So, because we're all from pretty different environments, and to get a double dose in Miami, we have 2 people. So I'd like to ask you, like, that question.
Yeah, you just touched on it. I mean, where you work changes fundamentally in how you work, and it's the biggest component is just bringing other people into what you're doing, especially if you have a new idea. To be able to have a set of people that you can bounce that idea off of within your own office space, that becomes a huge thing. I mean, I think of it as passive networking. I mean, networking is kind of nobody likes to do it, I mean, you go and maybe there's good drinks and stuff, but it's not like, ooh, I'm going to go to a networking event. But what these co-working spaces have become is, at least at Workbar, you have people from different disciplines, from different industries that you just get to know the same way you make friends. I mean, it doesn't happen day one, but over the course of weeks and months, you start seeing the same people. You're not going to know all 800 people, but you're gonna sort of pinball down the people that you get along with, and you're gonna make friends with them, and you're gonna do business with them. And the cool thing about how it changes the how you work is it's risky to sort of meet people from outside of your company and outside of your industry. And what I mean by risky is most of the time those conversations don't go anywhere, but except you had a good lunch, or you made friends or something. But every now and then that conversation really sparks a new idea and takes you to a whole new peak that you were never even thinking of before. And through these collaborative spaces, you just go about your day and you get that interaction. So there's tons of benefits for sort of embracing this way of work, and it's not just me talking, it's just the flourishing of these spaces, and I really think that's the core of why it's happening.
Cool. How do you feel about that? We're answering all each other's questions because it's pretty much the same.
Well, I don't know who's following the debate in common media right now, talking about whether STEM education is the way to go, and the comment that the president made about stop majoring in English major degrees and focus on engineering, and the pushback that he got from that. And then Sanjay Gupta came out, and people are talking about the significance of a liberal arts education and how you create this environment. I think if we go back to sort of the formation of schooling or education, because that's my background, it's always been about, like, how can you develop out markets, systems, et cetera, to advance society, right?
Yeah.
And you put yourself in a place from an apprenticeship model, right, that we got from ancient Greece and then even back to ancient Egypt. You put yourself in an apprenticeship model where you can be around like-minded people.
Yeah.
And so that's what I see in the startup movement. I see a framework where we are truly developing apprenticeship frameworks, corporate structures, models that have a social entrepreneurial accountability. Like, that's what millennials want. That's how millennials are developing, and really finding ways to innovate and create nuances around the development of businesses and corporate structures. So at EcoTech, we have currently 18 companies, and those 18 companies, 14 of those companies were founded by engineers, right? So we definitely have a huge sort of engineering and tech background. But in order to build out the leadership structure, we have that blue-collar worker, that middle American that's kind of been left out in that service sector push that we took. We also have huge opportunity for people in that liberal arts space to create some of the mind power and scaling of the business structure, which is necessary. So you have these natural environments coming together of people across disciplines,
So cool.
like Bill mentioned, but for the development of a particular goal, whether that goal be an electric motorcycle company or a company that's developing aquaponic systems, or the company that's growing mushrooms on coffee grinds, right? All real examples, right? But whatever that space is, that literally you create an environment where people can come together to develop out products and elements that are better for humanity as a whole. And I just think Miami is the most brilliant place for that to occur, based off where it's both geographically located and the type of people who naturally gravitate towards the space.
I have so many more questions for you. We'll talk after.
Yeah, me too.
How do you feel about where you work being how you work?
So working at the lab has kind of become my whole life.
Sure,
Wherever I
sure.
go, it is the lab. You know, it's. I was really fortunate. I actually came to Miami through wanting to start up a makerspace, and so I'm just like, can't believe what's
best
going on.
friends
Yeah,
now.
we're best friends now.
This happens. This is co-working, by the way.
So I'm just thinking about, like, how do I help tell the story about what's happening there and get our members connected with what you're doing. So that's the sort of thing that I love about working at a co-working space, is I get to use my mind that way. How can I support these other people? We have so many volunteers and community advocates, trying to make Miami, better, make the lives of everyone better, and being able to say yes a lot is just one of the favorite parts of my job, getting to do that. And I see people doing that all the time with each other. There's, we just had an event this last weekend, Bar Camp, which is, just tons of volunteers. It's been happening now for 10 years. Woo! I don't know how many of you were here at Bar
There you
Camp.
go.
But yeah, just tons and tons of events like that, pitch days with Wing Code. I mean, just so many opportunities for people to come together. And it just becomes this kind of long wave, from the workday into these other, events, and so then the question really becomes, how do you keep a work-life balance? You're talking about in New York, people hustle till midnight every night. Here it's, every time I go out, I'm at the grocery store. It's like, let's talk about work. But it's exciting what's happening, and it's really thrilling to be able to be part of that. And I think it's contagious, and when people who are outside of it even come in, at the lab, they walk in the door and they're just like, wow, I didn't know this was here. It's something that's new, and there's more and more co-working spaces opening up in Miami, and we're thrilled about that. Each of us will have a different flavor. We invite more sharing in Miami. It's the way it's going to be in the future, and it's smart, and we should all make it happen together.
That's super cool. It is the new way of working. I mean, it's not just about startups. It's, big corporations are knocking down cubicles and they're learning to work with each other better. Industries are giving their employees more from it. They're creating experience out of working where you're not just working for a company, you're enjoying your experience. What we like to call like intrapreneurs, not entrepreneurs, where you can be entrepreneurial within your organization. So we have 5 minutes left, and I was told a lot to the powers that be that we are going to go and ask the audience some questions.
So, Adrian Eisenstadt with Columbia Business School. My question is for Tamara. I was at the lab a couple of weeks ago, and I was really surprised that Ackerman has a shop set up.
Yeah, they do.
So my question is, how does a corporate like that fit into the ecosystem, apart from trying to maybe defend market share?
Right.
Obviously, startups can't afford an attorney that's charging $450 an hour. So how does that fit into the ecosystem and the culture at the lab?
Great question, and we're really excited actually about the partnership with Ackerman. It's actually Ackerman In. They're still brainstorming and working to figure out how do they make what they do accessible to a startup company. They want to be involved with what's happening here. We've seen that, we've hosted a number of different, the legal community knows they're service providers. They need to serve, they need to get access to this group of people, and the lab is the hub where that seems to be happening a lot. And, so we're thrilled to have Ackerman be part of that. Exactly what that's gonna look like over the next year, they're looking to host a series of events that'll help young companies. And then they may even be rolling out special, service fees and things like that. So again, it's kind of a young project. Thanks so much for noticing. And then the other thing I would say really quickly, we do have a lot of corporate interest in this space. ESPN actually has a creative team that's starting to work out of the lab. We had Citibank approach us. Unfortunately, we didn't have a large enough office for them. But so corporations know they need to innovate, and so it's another area that we're really looking to grow in. Is how do we support corporations in that process of connecting with startups and that sort of lean and fast growth, and so. I don't think that that's going to be a short-lived trend. I think that's more and more going to be the direction where corporations need to learn how to become more startup. We have actually an event coming up that we're partnering with High Note Foundry that we haven't announced yet, but we're really excited about. You like that?
There's your announcement. There you go.
You like that, man?
I have, just on that, I mean, we get this a lot in Boston as well. And corporations play a big part in the ecosystem. And I think a lot of these partnerships, that's almost the definition of this innovation economy. Because one of the things that's happened in Boston is we've created these things called these centers of excellence, which are sponsored by corporations. And then within industry verticals, startup teams from Workbar go work in their offices. And it's a way for the larger company to really help some of the early stage companies, and it's a way for the early stage companies to keep the larger host company really fresh. So getting that whole interaction together is a key part in this, and is a key part.
Yeah. It's definitely interesting to bridge that gap between the corporate world and the startup world.
Yeah.
We try all the time.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Tereska Lynham from Aurora Executive Consulting, and one of my big thrusts professionally is trying to develop the financial infrastructure in Miami to support and grow all of these wonderful ideas and companies that are here. And the Knight Foundation has been amazing at really funding the city, but you must have competition if we are going to make this work. And aside from me just going constantly to London, New York, and Boston, and a little bit in Chicago and San Francisco, I'm wondering what we can do here in Miami to attract more capital. Thank you so much.
Wow, that's a great question. I think this is happening. I think it happened in New York, right? All these startup companies were going to and this is just my own take on it. I'm one person. But everything happened centric around San Francisco because, that's investors understood how to invest in startups. They knew that, you're not going to take 50% of somebody's company to give them $100,000. So the accelerator started. One accelerator that's very prominent in SF is Y Combinator. They created companies like Dropbox and Airbnb. They knew how to do these investments. These investments were being deployed properly. And that's when I came into New York, actually, at that stage where we didn't really have that yet. And then it started. And then it came up. And then investors became understanding of how to invest in startups. And that actually had a huge effect on the ecosystem. Now all the developers that were creating these ideas didn't just want to go to SF. They wanted to go to New York now. And that's similar in Boston and all around. And that's happening in Miami today where 500 startups is coming out here. That's a major accelerator. That's an awesome accelerator. Is Dave McClure here, by the way? Because I'm pitching, I'm touting his accelerator program. But it's just, it'll come. It's happening. It has to start from somewhere. And from my eyes, because I've seen it happen very early stage in New York City, it's happening in Miami right now. And it starts with things like this, getting everybody together. And it has an overall effect on the ecosystem. So my advice is keep having things like this. The Atlantic, all the time.
But I think also if you look at the movement in Silicon Valley, if you look at the movement in these various cities, it starts with having successful companies launch. And so that's our focus point with our companies to actually, if you look at the success rate for actually getting companies to market readiness, incubators, accelerators, co-working space have a lot of work to do in terms of raising the percentage rates of successful companies. And so that's a key piece that we're focused on too. That's why we provide various types of supports for our companies because we want them to reach certain economic thresholds, the certain product thresholds, certain contract thresholds, so that they individually start to draw the attention of larger companies. Because once we have some of our smaller companies getting bought up, larger companies interested in them, and building that ecosystem where Earthware's products are now proliferating the market, you won't have to recruit capital because capital will start coming to them.
Boom. That's it. Thank you so much, everybody. I want to thank you guys for coming out. Thank you. Awesome. Cool.